Reclamation is releasing the Colorado River Basin's August 24-month study. The August 24-month study projections of system storage and reservoir elevations are used to determine the annual operations for Lake Powell and Lake Mead for 2022, pursuant to the interim operating guidelines that have been in place since 2007, an agreement with Mexico adopted in 2017, and the drought contingency plans that were finalized in 2019. We are seeing the effects of climate change in the Colorado River Basin through extended drought, extreme temperatures, expansive wildfires, and in some places flooding and landslides. And now is the time to take action to respond to them. The basin is experiencing its 22nd year of drought, and earlier this summer, the reservoirs hit their lowest levels since they were originally filled. The total Colorado River system storage today is 40% of capacity, down from 49% at this time last year. This year, we're seeing the combined effects of lower than average snowpack, hotter temperatures, and drier than average soil conditions. And unfortunately, that trend may continue. The 24-month study issued today projects Lake Powell's January 1st, 2022 elevation to be 3,535.4 feet. And as a result, Lake Powell will operate in the mid-elevation release tier during water year 2022, with a release of 7.48 million acre-feet. The 24-month study projects Lake Mead's January 1st, 2022 elevation to be 1,065.85 feet. And as a result, during calendar year 2022, Lake Mead will operate in the Tier 1 shortage condition. This is the first time since the interim operating guidelines were adopted that trigger has been met. In accordance with federal legislation, our interim operating guidelines, the drought contingency plans, and Minute 323 with Mexico, a Tier 1 shortage condition will trigger additional reductions and water-saving contributions for Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. Today's announcement highlights the challenges that we face in the Colorado River Basin and elsewhere across the West. To address these challenges, we urgently need to build upon and expand the work we have done in the basin over the past 2 decades to conserve water, preserve hydropower resources, and operate our infrastructure efficiently. The progress we have been made has been accomplished through strong partnerships with the states, tribes, and water users throughout the basin, and we look forward to the continued coordination that will be essential in the future. I want to compliment the technical staff at the Bureau of Reclamation for their personal and professional commitment to scientific integrity and to the utilization of sound science to help guide our decision-making. And I want to thank them for their continued efforts to provide essential technical assistance to the states, tribes, and water users throughout the basin. Reclamation's decades-long investments in building and maintaining technical capability has helped ensure that we have a reliable water and power supply for the 40 million people who rely on the Colorado River today. The Department of the Interior is committed to addressing the challenges of climate change in the Colorado River Basin by utilizing science-based innovative strategies and working cooperatively with our other federal agency partners and the diverse communities that rely on the Colorado River. We are encouraged by the potential for additional investments through the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we appreciate the continued support from the Biden-Harris team at the White House and from Congress. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today, and we look forward to answering your important questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Secretary Trujillo. It is now my privilege to welcome Deputy Commissioner Camille Kalimlim-Tootin to discuss basin collaboration.
Thank you, Ron. Good afternoon. My name is Camille Kalimlim-Tootin, and I am the Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Reclamation. Thank you for joining us today. Assistant Secretary Trujillo described the actions we are announcing today and the agreements in place that inform those actions. Regional Directors Pullen and Gould will describe with more granularity what those actions mean operationally for the basin. And my colleagues, Dan Bunk and Heather Patno, will describe the science, data, and hydrology that informed our decisions. But what I want to focus on today are the actions that Reclamation is taking and what they mean to millions of people across the West. At the turn of the millennium, our major reservoirs in the basin, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, were nearly full. I remember being on a tour at Hoover Dam and standing at the top of the dam, leaning over, thinking that I could touch the water because the water level was so high. Little did we know then that 2000 would be the start of what is now a 22-year drought. In just 5 years of that drought, Lakes Mead and Powell lost 50% of their capacity. The basin leaders and Reclamation had the foresight to recognize that we needed to do something and finalize a consensus plan should the hydrology become worse. Guidelines for Lake Powell and Lake Mead, including a critical shortage sharing agreement, was in place by year 7 of the drought, and subsequent agreements were adopted and enacted by Congress, as well as minutes to our treaty with the country of Mexico. The announcement today is a recognition that the hydrology that was planned for years ago, but we hoped we would never see, is here. And today's announcement demonstrates that Reclamation is fully implementing the plan as outlined by the basin agreements. At the heart of today's announcement is also the acknowledgement of the hardship that the drought has brought to people across the basin states, to our tribal communities, and to Mexico. At Reclamation, we know these impacts because the 5,400 public servants who make up this agency are from or live across the West. The impacts of this drought are to our colleagues, to our neighbors, and to our friends. So it doesn't just impact the communities that we serve, it impacts the communities that we call home. My hometown is in the basin. It is for these reasons that Reclamation does not take these actions lightly or do so easily. We do so because it is necessary in protecting the system and in implementing the agreements we have in place and as enacted by Congress. The Bureau of Reclamation cannot control the hydrology, and we also recognize the very real possibility that the hydrology that was planned for years ago may not be the worst that the basin may see in the future, and we may have to utilize the adaptive management tools in our plans. This may also mean that additional actions will likely be necessary in the very near future. Reclamation is committed to continuing the near century of tradition since the signing of the Colorado River Compact in 1922, of communication and collaboration with all of our partners in the basin. I want to thank the basin states, tribal leaders, the country of Mexico, water users, and all of the stakeholders for your continued partnership. I would especially like to thank the Bureau of Reclamation for their service and for rising to meet one of the most challenging but important issues that we are facing today. Our success in meeting our challenges in the basin today and in the future will only occur if we do so together. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Tootin. And discussing activities in the Upper Colorado Basin, I'm privileged to introduce the Regional Director for the Upper Colorado Basin region, Mr. Wayne Pullen.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks to all of you for attending. My name's Wayne Pullen. I am the Regional Director of the Upper Colorado Basin region for the Bureau of Reclamation. The Upper Colorado Basin region covers the states of Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. We're responsible for Glen Canyon Dam, Lake Powell, and the other facilities with the Colorado River Storage Project. We value the cooperative relationship we have with these Upper Basin states, the Upper Colorado River Commission, the Lower Basin states, as well as those others with interests in the Colorado River, including water users, tribes, and other stakeholders. My intention today is to address key reservoir elevations at Lake Powell. As you're aware, Lake Powell has reached its lowest water surface elevation since its first fill. Today, the elevation is 3,551.8 feet above sea level. Elevation 490 feet is the lowest elevation at which we can generate power. Falling below this minimum power pool has the potential to lead to cavitation and damage to the power facility. Also, the generation of power is critical in other ways. Lake Powell's Glen Canyon Dam generates enough energy to meet the needs of 363,000 households, and the revenue from our generation of hydropower is essential for continued operation of our facilities and for funding our environmental contingency planning. Reclamation in the Upper Basin states exercised great foresight. First, in setting an elevation of 3,525 feet as a critical elevation. This is 35 feet above the minimum power pool. And second, in establishing tools for defending that elevation. These tools are contained in the Drought Response Operating Agreement. One tool is to raise the elevation of Lake Powell by adjusting the timing of deliveries from Lake Powell to Lake Mead within our environmental compliance requirements. And the second tool is to raise the elevation by making supplemental deliveries from the upper reservoirs of Flaming Gorge, Blue Mesa, and Navajo. We are in the process of making the first set of supplemental deliveries under the agreement. At the same time, Reclamation and the Upper Basin states are engaged in developing, under that agreement, a drought response operations plan that will govern future supplemental deliveries should conditions require them. As we do that planning, we will be applying the best available science, as well as consulting with key stakeholders and keeping them apprised of our plans and progress along the way. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but we have a strong history of working together to protect the Colorado River Basin and the people and the natural environment which depend upon it. Thank you. I'll now turn the time back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Regional Director Pullen. Discussing activities in the Lower Colorado Basin, I'm honored to introduce the Regional Director for the Lower Colorado Basin region, Ms. Jackie Gould.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all for joining us today. As announced earlier, the Lower Basin will operate under a Level 1 shortage condition in 2022 for the first time ever. Since 2007, water was conserved in Lake Mead that was the equivalent of over 50 feet of elevation. This is a result of outstanding efforts of the states of Arizona, California, Nevada, and the country of Mexico. If not for that, we would have had to declare a shortage years ago. Reclamation has worked with the basin states, Mexico, tribes, and other stakeholders for 2 decades, preparing for the conditions we are seeing today. The 2007 interim guidelines, the Lower Basin Drought Contingency Plan, and Minute 323 of the Water Treaty with Mexico are guiding our operations for 2022. Arizona will see a delivery reduction of about 18%. Nevada's reduction will be 7%, and Mexico's reduction will be about 5%. 25 million people in the lower basin depend on Colorado River water. We hope for improved snowpack in the coming years to help mitigate the effects of this drought. In the meanwhile, we are working hard to implement every action possible to protect Lake Mead from reaching critical elevations. Thank you, and back to you, Rob.
Thank you, Regional Director Gould. We will now receive an update on hydrology in the upper basin from Ms. Heather Patno, and then we'll receive an update on hydrology in the lower basin by Mr. Dan Bunk. Over to you, Ms. Patno.
Thank you, Rob. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. My name is Heather Patno with the Upper Colorado Basin region. The Upper Colorado River Basin has experienced the driest 22-year period on record from 2000 to 2021, with conditions beginning in 2012 coming in as the driest 10-year period. The Colorado River Basin has experienced 2 consecutive dry years, with 2020 receiving 54% of average runoff. This year, we received 89% of median snowpack, and our projected total inflow to Lake Powell is 32% of average, which will be the second driest year on record. Lake Powell and Lake Mead combined storage began 2020 at 46% of live capacity. Mead reached its historic low elevation on June 9th, and Powell elevation reached its new historic low on July 24th. Delving further into historical elevations, reservoirs provide safety by capturing above-average hydrology for use during times of drought. Lake Powell and Lake Mead storage has fluctuated over the last 50 years, and these graphs illustrate the combined storage capacity of the 2 reservoirs during the initial years when Powell began filling, reaching 40% in 1967. Capturing the variable hydrology through history to the combined storage capacity at the beginning of the drought at 92% in 2000. Powell decreased 145 feet from 2000 to 2005, directly attributable to the record low year runoff of 2002, with 24% of average. The 2007 interim guidelines and 2019 drought contingency plan, along with variable hydrology and some above average years, stabilized Powell elevations, which have remained around 50% of live capacity over the 22-year drought period. Lake Powell and Lake Mead storage began 2020 at 46%, and the 2 consecutive dry hydrologic seasons have resulted in a Powell decrease over 55 feet, and a projected end-of-water year capacity is 31%. Powell is expected to continue to decrease prior to spring runoff in 2022. What conditions precipitated the significant decrease in storage? This slide illustrates current soil moisture deficit and seasonal precipitation for the Colorado River Basin. The soil moisture slide on the left shows most of the Colorado River Basin soil moisture deficit last month, prior to the monsoons. The deficit throughout the basin was 8 to 12 inches or greater. The right side shows the seasonal precipitation calculated last month, where most of the basin was between 0 to 70% precipitation for the water year. Shifting to current conditions, next slide, incorporating the significant monsoonal events over the last month, the soil moisture indications have improved with significant areal extent of deficit removed from consideration and other areas decreasing in total deficit. The basin precipitation changed significantly throughout the southern extent of the lower Colorado Basin. While we remain below average in the upper Colorado, conditions have improved, although continued precipitation is necessary to initialize beneficial conditions for snowpack accumulation and retention this winter. Dan Bunk from the lower Colorado Basin region will provide information related to the August 2021 24-month study tier determinations for Lake Powell and Lake Mead.
Thank you, Heather. This teacup diagram shows key elevations for Lake Powell and Lake Mead including the end of calendar year elevations from Reclamation's 24-month study, a 2-year operational outlook for Colorado River system reservoirs. The August 24-month study is important for Lake Powell and Lake Mead because this projection sets the operating tier for the upcoming year for both reservoirs. For example, this August 2021 24-month study sets the operating tiers for Powell and Mead in 2022. Based on this projection and consistent with the 2007 interim guidelines, Lake Powell will operate in the mid-elevation release tier in water year 2022 with an annual release of 7.48 million acre-feet. Also based on this projection and consistent with the 2007 interim guidelines, Lake Mead will operate in a Tier 1 shortage condition in calendar year 2022. Delivery reductions in the lower basin will be accompanied by water savings contributions under the lower basin drought contingency plan. Consistent with Minute 323 to the U.S.-Mexico Water Treaty, Mexico will also incur delivery reductions and make water savings contributions in calendar year 2022. This slide shows the delivery reductions and water savings contributions by country and by state in the lower basin under the 2007 interim guidelines, lower basin drought contingency plan, and Minute 323 at different elevation thresholds at Lake Mead. In calendar year 2022, Lake Mead will operate in the elevation band between 1075 and 1050 feet, a Tier 1 shortage condition with reductions in water savings contributions by Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico. These reductions are about 18%, 7%, and 5% of the annual water allocations for Arizona, Nevada, and Mexico, respectively, totaling 613,000 acre-feet. This volume is equivalent to approximately 8 feet in Lake Mead elevation at current lake levels. Also, as the table shows, these reductions increase as Lake Mead's level decreases. This is by design to help reduce the risk of falling to critically low elevations if Lake Mead's elevation were to continue to decline. Next. The following 2 slides show a 2-year outlook from the August 24-month study based on 3 different inflow assumptions: a dry scenario, a medium scenario, and a wet scenario, recognizing that there are drier and wetter scenarios that would fall below or rise above these projections. For Lake Powell, beyond the end of this calendar year, 2021, there is significant uncertainty. While dry conditions have persisted these past 2 years and we are concerned with continued declining reservoir levels, as this graphic shows, there is a broad range of potential reservoir conditions as we look forward the next 1 to 2 years. This is a similar graphic for Lake Mead, a 2-year outlook from the August 24-month study based on 3 different inflow assumptions. While there is not quite as much uncertainty for Lake Mead, at least in calendar year 2022, if the reservoir were to continue to decline, there is the potential for deeper levels of shortages in the lower basin in upcoming years. Reclamation is working on an update of its 5-year outlook for Colorado River system conditions to provide more information on potential reservoir conditions at Lake Powell and Lake Mead. We plan to make this update available towards the end of August or the beginning of September. This concludes the Colorado River Basin hydrology update. I now pass it back to Mr. Robert Manning.
Thank you, Ms. Patno and Mr. Bunk, and thanks to all of our presenters. We will now hear from our partners in the basin states before taking your questions. We are honored to introduce representatives from the Arizona Department of Water Resources, the Southern Nevada Water Authority, the Colorado River Board of California, and the state of Wyoming. Please welcome Mr. Tom Bushotsky from the Arizona Department of Water Resources.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Assistant Secretary Trujillo and Deputy Commissioner Tootin, for inviting me to speak today. So we've been expecting this Tier 1 declaration for several months. It is not a surprise. And as we heard, Arizona will lose 18% of its Colorado River water supplies. But Arizona has a plan that allows for partial mitigation to give some help to those water users in Arizona that are impacted, largely farmers in central Arizona, but also an Indian tribe, one of our 22 tribes, and a couple of cities that rely on the water that's being cut. But to me, most importantly, the August 24-month study shows that another key trigger under the drought contingency plan has been hit. The study projects that in July 2023, the elevation of Lake Mead will go below 1,030 feet. As a result, the drought contingency plan requires that Arizona, California, and Nevada consult to take additional actions to prevent Lake Mead from going below 1,020 feet. Arizona, California, and Nevada have already begun to meet and will continue to meet to fulfill that requirement. While the additional actions to protect elevation 1020 are not yet determined, the tools we largely have to achieve that goal are twofold. One, conserving additional water in Lake Mead, or two, reducing our water use from the lake. This is a serious turn of events, but not a crisis. The adaptive management built into the drought contingency plan will serve us well as we deal with the next steps. And to my partners, the basin states, the Department of Interior, the Bureau of Reclamation, Mexico, tribes, water users, and NGOs, the challenge before us to help protect the lake further and to protect 1020 elevation will be daunting, but we can and will address these issues and be successful together in partnership. And I want to stress that. So I want everyone to know that as we did in the drought contingency plan, we made hard choices in Arizona and in Mexico and the other basin states, but we successfully got to the finish line on the drought contingency plan, and we'll successfully get to the finish line in this next element of the drought contingency plan, the consultation that I just described. And with that, I thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Bushatsky. At this time, please welcome Mr. John Insminger from the Southern Nevada Water Authority.
Good afternoon. Today's declaration underscores the seriousness of the drought and its impact on the Colorado River. We have been preparing for more than 2 decades to respond to shortage and the inevitable impacts of a hotter and drier climate. In response to declining lake levels, Southern Nevada has invested nearly $1.5 billion in new infrastructure to protect access to our primary water supply. We are managing one of the nation's largest and most comprehensive water conservation programs, and at the forefront of that program is our ability to sustainably recycle all of our indoor water use. And to further advance recycled water supplies, Nevada and California recently announced a partnership to develop a large-scale water recycling program. Our congressional delegation, led by Senator Catherine Cortez Masto, made sure the recent Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act will help fund large-scale water recycling projects like this one, helping meet future water needs of the 2 states and helping to protect the Colorado River. Continued cooperation, collaboration, and partnerships are critical to our region's future. We cannot solve these problems in a vacuum. It requires an increased level of commitment and resolve by all parties to address the future squarely and candidly. We must adapt to the new reality of a warmer, drier future, where today's Colorado River hydrology is not the same hydrology this basin knew a century ago. Every community, every sector, every industry that uses Colorado River water must do more to conserve and protect this critical water resource upon which 40 million Americans depend. While the future is sobering, we are in this together. It will take all of our ingenuity, creativity, and sustained effort to meet the moment. And I am confident that we can build upon the collaborative accomplishments of the past 20 years. We have the tools to take the next steps in managing this critical river system over the long term. And we have the obligation to our states, constituents, and local economies to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Insman. Please welcome Mr. Peter Nelson from the Colorado River Board of California.
Thank you, Mr. Manning, Assistant Secretary Trujillo, Commissioner Tootin, for allowing me to speak today. Obviously, the news on the Colorado system of low runoff and declining lake levels forecasts are not good news for the Colorado River Basin, the 6 basin states, nor for California. It's not good for the environment, the tribes, the people, Mexico, and all of the stakeholders. It presents itself with great challenges for all of us. The Bureau of Reclamation has done an excellent job of presenting the data and the modeling, which clearly shows that the climate is changing to an unprecedented hotter, drier hydrology scenario. The 7 basin states have been planning for this with incremental agreements and actions. The 2019 drought contingency planning agreements, including the triggers we are realizing today, Reclamation's basin-wide tribal water study of 2018, Minute 323 establishing a binational water scarcity contingency plan, are but a few of the positive adaptive management agreements we've reached through collaboration and cooperation. California is facing drought in both the Colorado River Basin and the Sierra Nevadas. Fortunately, good planning has enabled California to be prepared for these times, but that does not limit the challenges that we face ahead. In 2004, California completed a quantification settlement agreement to reduce California's draw on the river. After the interim operating guideline 2007 shortage criteria guidelines were collaboratively negotiated by the 7 basin states, California has conserved and stored over 4 million acre-feet of Colorado River and contributed mightily to the intentionally created surplus that has supported Lake Mead elevation. California is joined at the hip with its sister states, tribes, the country of Mexico, to collaboratively work on this challenging hydrology, which has been developing for the last 20 years. Agricultural and urban conservation, storage management, and urban recycling are important tools moving forward. As John mentioned, Southern California has partnered with Nevada and Arizona to design a regional Southern California Purification Center. This facility would show proof of upscaling, ultimately working towards serving 500,000 homes and replacing 150,000 acre-feet of Colorado River water. The proposed bipartisan infrastructure bill, fortunately, has funds designated for this multi-state project, also supported by the Bureau. California takes drought seriously. While not contributing directly under the DCP triggering mechanisms, California has already been focused on elevation building at Lake Mead by creating intentionally created surplus. Conservation, recycling and reuse, groundwater management, desalination, storage are all tools in the box for agencies across the state to implement programs for greater certainty and reliability. We are directing efforts to the technical analysis to enable decision-making based on the best data and science. With that, I would like to pass it back to Mr. Robert Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Please welcome Mr. Pat Terrell from the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, Rob. Appreciate the invitation to be here today and welcome everybody who's watching. I am with the state of Wyoming and am the Wyoming Commissioner to the Upper Colorado River Commission. First, I want to make it clear that the Upper Basin states of Utah, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming are very concerned about the hydrology this basin faces. We Upper Basin states understand the risks and the vulnerabilities we face in the Colorado River due to the millennium drought we're in and a potentially hotter and drier future. It is very important that we have in place the drought contingency plan. While it is not a hydrologic predictor, it does provide the tools to help manage what we're seeing now, as troubling as that is. We appreciate the lower basin will be dealing with shortages, which threaten to get worse. Unsatisfied demands are a situation with which the upper basin is very familiar, and it is unfortunate the entire basin is in this position. The upper basin is experiencing the effects of the Drought Response Operations Agreement, which has called upon in-basin releases from the Colorado River Storage Project initial units. These actions are intended to protect critical levels at Lake Powell, to maintain power generation, as you heard earlier, and to assure our compliance with the 1922 compact. While the current drought release or operations agreement releases will be done by the end of the year, discussions are underway to develop and finalize, if necessary, drought response plans for 2022. Let me conclude by saying that we join our partners in the Lower Basin, Department of Interior, and all stakeholders on the river in committing all that we can to diligently husband the waters of the Colorado River Basin in this critical period. At the same time, we are also committed to the work needed to arrive at a longer-term solution. Thank you, and Rob, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Terrell. And thanks to all of our presenters and partners. We will now address your questions during a moderated question and answer period. Again, to submit a question, please click on the comments bubbles on the top right of your screen, middle icon with a question mark in it. Please include your name and affiliation and specify who your question is for if possible. Again, we're committed to addressing as many questions as possible. Over to you, Becky Bryant.
Thank you, Rob, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Our first question is for Deputy Commissioner Tootin. The question is from Trip Baltz of Bloomberg. The question is, can you address the likelihood of more cuts coming to more states in 2023 and 24, given the intensity of the current 21-year drought?
Thank you, Becky, and thank you for that question. The announcements we make today and the actions we plan to take are based on the agreements we have in place. And so should lake levels continue to decline, we will, and should the hydrology continue to deteriorate, our plans have in place that if they reach certain levels, there will be additional cuts and actions. Thank you.
Our next question is for Mr. Bushatsky and Mr. Etzminger. The question comes from Stephanie Ebbs of ABC News. The question says, can you explain which water users in Arizona and Nevada will have their allotments reduced, and if Interior or Bureau of Reclamation sets any guidelines on how state and local agencies should implement reductions?
So John, if you'd like, I'll start. This is Tom Bushatsky. So within Arizona, some of the water that we are losing has traditionally been stored underground for the future or to replace groundwater that has been pumped out of the ground. but more importantly, our Central Arizona Project farmers, so farmers in the 3 central counties in Arizona, Pima County, Maricopa County, and Pinal County, will be losing substantial portions of their surface water. They will be able to pump some amount of groundwater under our 1980 Groundwater Management Act. I mentioned we also have one tribe and a couple of cities who will lose a small, very small amount of their water, not really, in my opinion, directly impacting them. Most of that water is being stored underground by them, and that is a serious loss for them. However, in terms of how these reductions fall to our water users in the state of Arizona, there's a priority system within the state of Arizona, and that's how these water users are getting these shortages. We do not, and the federal government does not dictate to them how to deal with those reductions or how to achieve them. That is up to the individual water user, but they will not be delivered the water by the entity that delivers that water to Central Arizona Project. So they will physically not have the water, and they will have to figure out how to deal with the ramifications of that outcome. So John, I'll turn it to you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. For Nevada, the shortage will accrue to the legal entitlement of the Southern Nevada Water Authority. However, because we have successfully pre-conserved these reductions, we will not actually need to reduce deliveries to any of our member agencies.
Thank you. Our next question is for Deputy Commissioner Tootin. The question is from Ian James of the Arizona Republic. The question is, regarding your comments that additional actions may be needed in the very near future, what sorts of additional actions are being discussed?
Thank you for that question. First, we are investing in programs like Water Smart to do more conservation in the basin and keep levels in Powell and Mead higher. We also know that should the lakes reach certain levels, additional reductions will be necessary. And as Mr. Bushatsky mentioned, as part of the plans we have in place, there are adaptive management provisions, including revisiting certain lake levels should we hit those. So as always, we'll work with our partners in the basin as we look to take more actions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is for Regional Director Pullen. It is from Angus Thurmer of the Wyoming File. The question is, with this scenario as a backdrop, does Reclamation have an opinion about Wyoming's water development plans to build or create 115,000 acre feet of additional storage in the upper basin for possible diversion out of the river system?
Thank you for the question. I'm not prepared to comment on any specific plans that the state of Wyoming has with respect to development of additional water. It is worth noting that one of the purposes of the Colorado River Storage Project is to assist states in making use of their apportionment under the compact. Wyoming has exercised foresight in the work of their Wyoming Water Development Commission, and with our long history with Wyoming, we're confident that they'll pursue any future projects responsibly, fully aware of and in the context of the hydrology and the difficulties on the Colorado River. Thank you.
The next question is for Assistant Secretary Trujillo. It's from Annie Snyder from Politico. The question is, you and the other Interior officials all underscored the dire hydrology that has driven this declaration, as well as the effects of climate change. As the parties head back to the negotiating table to craft new operating guidelines beginning in 2026, what hydrological scenarios does Interior believe they should be planning for?
Thank you for the question, Annie. There's no doubt that climate change is real. We're experiencing it every day in the Colorado River Basin and in other basins in the West. I think the best strategy for planning is to think about a broad range of scenarios and a broad range of potential hydrology, and to work closely with our partners in the basin to try to think through all of those scenarios. I'll reiterate that I'm very honored to work with the sound technical folks at Reclamation, who are the experts on these types of issues. And we look forward to continued coordination on all of them. Thank you.
Our next questions are for Mr. Bunk. They come from Rachel Ramirez from CNN. Her two questions are, number one, how will the cuts be made exactly? And two, can someone speak more about the tier system and how each tier shortage will impact what community exactly?
Hello, thank you for that question. I think there's two sort of levels at which we implement the shortage reductions under the interim guidelines and the drought contingency plan. One is how we operate Lake Mead and the different reductions that are required under those agreements. And then another aspect is coordinating closely with the state on how to implement those shortages within the state. As was mentioned previously, we've worked very closely with the state of Arizona on developing a process for how to implement shortages for contractors with Colorado River water in Arizona. That process is currently ongoing, and we'll be providing more information on that in the near term. And as mentioned within the state of Nevada, we work closely with the Southern Nevada Water Authority on how those reductions would be implemented in Nevada. One thing to keep in mind is that as the shortage levels deepen, they have potentially different impacts on different water users, in particular within the state of Arizona. And we're continuing to coordinate with the state on how to implement those shortages at deeper levels. Thank you for the question.
We have time for a few more questions. Our next question is for Tom Bushatsky. It is from Tony Davis of the Arizona Daily Star. The question is, Mr. Etzminger of Nevada discussed a major water recycling program in that state, including a California-Nevada regional water recycling program. When will Arizona start a program like that? Is that feasible for us too?
So, Tony, in Arizona, especially in the areas that use Colorado River water, we already are recycling and reusing virtually all of our treated wastewater. Some of that is for non-potable uses. Some of that is for the environment and restoring and maintaining habitat and stream flow. And some of that eventually is going to be for direct potable reuse. Our state recently put rules together allowing that to happen. We were already doing injection of reclaimed water into the ground and withdrawing it outside the area of hydrologic impact, something called indirect potable reuse. So we are also far ahead of the curve in reuse of reclaimed water. And we'll continue to look for opportunities to continue to use every drop of that reclaimed water to take pressure off the Colorado River sources that come to the state of Arizona.
Our last question is for Deputy Commissioner Tootin. The question says that Reclamation has been overestimating how much water the Colorado River can provide. What is Reclamation's response to this criticism? And what is a fair estimate for what natural flows will be at least Ferry over the next 10 or more years?
Thank you for that question. Let me tell you what we're seeing in the basin as outlined by my colleagues, Heather Patno and Dan Bunk. This year, or last year, we had 89% of snowpack, and certain conditions, whether it be the soil, moisture, or an increasing temperature, yielded in the result of 34% of inflow into Lake Powell this year. And so there's a series of factors in play when you look at the hydrology. So moving forward, Reclamation is committed to using the best available science, to working with all our partners, and also working with our sister agencies, whether it's USGS, NRCS, and NOAA, on better forecasting capabilities so that we can make better informed decisions into the future.
Thank you, and thank you for the questions that were submitted. I'll now turn it back over to Rob Manning.
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. To our media colleagues, we will follow up on the questions we were not able to address today. Please note that this news release and information on Reclamation's Drought web portal and other resources are available via our newsroom. Again, thank you. The Bureau of Reclamation will remain transparent as we continue relying on the best available science to guide our operations and maximize the efficient use of Colorado River water. Thank you for your commitment to accuracy. Please take care.